Hello, today we're going to design a keychain using our MakerBot and Tinkercad software. To start things off, we're going to go to www.tinkercad.com. It should ask you for a login. If you have your information, go ahead and log in and set the account up. Once you do, you should get a screen that looks like this. Now, where it says work plane, this is going to be similar to an artboard on Illustrator. With three-dimensional software, you usually see something that's called planes or work planes. These can be anywhere from a ground view, so if I'm looking at the object from the ground, it looks something like this. If I'm looking from a side view, you can have different planes depending on the different angles that you're looking to work with in a three-dimensional object. But for this one, we're just going to go ahead and set up our work plane being the ground. On the left-hand side, you see all of the different buttons here. Now this allows me to change the view, zoom in, zoom out, orthographic or perspective, and then finally I can spin my object or spin the view with the box here at the top corner. On my right-hand side, I've got all the different shapes, which is really nice because as I'm developing or designing my project, I can just pull in either a sphere or wedge and just go ahead and make that object depending on what design I need. To start things off, I'm going to go over to my shapes and I'm going to click on the cube here. Once I click on it, I'm just going to drag it over and drop it on my work plane. I have a few options here. I can choose whether it's going to be a solid or a hole. I'd like to have it a solid. And what's nice is I can click on this button again and choose what color I'd like. Now this is not going to affect the final product at all, but this is just nice for as I design, I can kind of have a good idea of the different layers and different colors. I'll go ahead and choose orange. It'll be a nice color to start off with. I can also change my length, width, and height. And for this project, we were specifically told that we need it to be 25 millimeters wide, or 25 millimeters high by 25 millimeters high. I'll hit enter. 75 millimeters wide. I'll hit enter again. And finally a height of just 5 millimeters. So once I've done that, it should look something like this. Now as I zoom in, you can see all of my edges are very sharp and the corners are at 90 degrees. I can go with my radius tool and edge these out a little bit, and as you can see, it begins to round out the edges. My steps just kind of clean this up, so if I have very few steps, you can see where it's a very straight line as my corners. As I increase my steps, it does increase the curvature of that design, so I have a little bit of options there as far as how I would like to set up my project. Finally, I'm going to look at the top screen. My shape looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this back. For the next step, I'm going to grab my text button and drag and drop it into the screen. Now it says text for now, but as I adjust these things, I can change the name of it. So this is going to be D's truck, because it is a keychain that we're making here. The font, we can change the different ones, but I like this multi-language font. I'm going to go ahead to my height, and I'm going to change that to just 3 millimeters high. And I'm good with the different segments and bevels, so I'm just going to hit enter and see what that looks like there. Now as I can see, it's much larger than I need it to be. So to start things off, I'm going to zoom into my design. I can see this little arrow, and that will allow me to pull my design text up and down in the screen. So I'm going to design it so that it's right on, if not just a little bit into the design of my keychain. So when I look at that design, it's actually embedded in that design. That will keep it all as one piece or one body. Next thing I'm going to do is look at the design, and I'd like to shrink it. So I'm going to grab this corner here and gradually pull and shrink the design to the size I need. Now I have two options. One is I can just grab this corner and move it to the direction or the size I need it to be, or I can hit the shift button. When I do that, it scales it all in one size, and no matter where I go, it scales the entire design at one time. If I let off this shift button, I can now make it thicker or longer or whatever size I need. So depending on what you need the functionality for will depend on if you use the shift button or not. Finally, I'm letting off the shift button. I'm going to grab this center screen, and now I'm just going to move it to the location that I need it to be in. So finally for D's truck, I like it right here. This looks like a pretty good design. The last thing I'm going to do is put the circle here for my KeyChain fob. Now here's a nice section here is my cylinder. I can choose whichever cylinder. Now this is just kind of a nice functionality because it gives me these the hole ability right off the bat. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this in, drop it into the design. And where I see solid or hole, I'm just going to head and click on the hole functionality. This will allow my design to have a hole as opposed to an actual physical body in this design. So I'll click on the hole functionality. I'm going to go ahead and shrink it down because I don't need it a very large hole. Click on the button and say we'll make this a 3mm hole by 3mm hole. Now I'm not done yet because we're still going to need to place it into the design. So I'm going to go with my top view and then moving this hole into position of where I need it. Finally, I'm going to spin my design or my plane around so I can see where I'm at. I'm going to grab the top arrow and slide all the way down to make sure it goes all the way through my project. Finally, I'm going to go look through my design one more time, move my cylinder to where it needs to be. I feel comfortable with it being there. And there's the design for my keychain. Last step I'm going to do is click on the export button, download for 3D printing. I'm going to want to download it as an STL file. Now this is the file format that my MakerBot 3D printer software recognizes, so we'll click on that. And now it's exporting to my, once I have that STL file, I can open it up in my MakerBot software.